Right, hello everyone, and welcome to EBS's latest webinar, which is about the 2025 SonicWALL Cyber Threat Report. Essentially, what the report is and the importance, particularly in our marketplace. So, who better to join us today than James from SonicWALL themselves? But before handing over to James, to note this is being recorded for the benefits of our YouTube channel, so you can review that as well later. So during the session, if you have any questions, please add them to the message board, and perhaps if you can also turn your microphones to mute and turn your video off as well if they're on. So as many of you will be aware, EBS specialise in IT support and services, and obviously security is such an important element of that these days. And hence we work very closely with SonicWALL. So today I'm expecting it probably to be a 10-15 minute session, and it's over to you, James.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Simon. Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining. Just to give you a little bit of background, I suppose, before we jump in. I'm one of the territory managers here at SonicWALL. I've looked after EBS for a number of years now. And I'd say in that time, the cyber threat landscape is constantly evolving and changing. We've had to develop ourselves as a vendor, as an organization. I suppose, you guys as end users have had to shift your focus, and your challenges and your requirements are changing constantly year on year. So hopefully this session and over the next few slides, I'll talk about the threat report and a little bit about who we are and what we're facing today in terms of challenges. Hopefully that will kind of hit home, and it will give you a bit of an insight into what the landscape is like now, and also what you should probably be prioritizing moving forward in terms of protective layers of security, integrations, management, etc. So as you can see from the title, it is a battlefield out there. It is a war against cyber crime, I suppose. We're an American company, so you'll see some Americanisms throughout this presentation. That's kind of one of them, but it does kind of hit home in the sense that we are at war. It is a battlefield, and we do need to be super strong against those cyber criminals. So if you haven't heard of SonicWALL before, we're a cybersecurity vendor founded around 35 years ago now. Really well known throughout the industry for our network solutions and network security. There was a stat a few years ago that around 1 in 4 firewalls in SMB organizations, so under 150 users, was a SonicWALL in the UK. We've got a really strong market share in that kind of segment and those types of organizations. And we understand from a security management perspective, how you guys as end users need to be protected and need to be secured. We've added a huge amount to our portfolio over those years. We've made a couple of acquisitions over the past 18 months into complementary technologies to the firewall. So, monitoring 24/7 services, some zero trust network access policies around, secure remote access, which can bolster your kind of VPNs, SSL VPN licenses that you might have at the moment. So we're evolving just as much as the threat landscape is, and hopefully there to kind of meet your challenges. In the bottom right-hand side there, you'll see we work with around 17,000 global channel partners. EBS are one of them. They're one of our kind of valued MSPs in and around the Birmingham area. They've been a partner for a huge number of years. They work really well and provide a really nice managed service to kind of take that workload and take that time and effort away from you as IT managers, to be, put into other kind of areas and some more kind of efficient things in your day-to-day lives, whilst bolstering your security posture moving forwards. This slide is kind of self-explanatory. I'll be honest with you. We've all lived through the past 5 years. We've all lived through the COVID period and understood the complexity that comes with, the shift from an office-based organization to now a remote user predominant organization. If you kind of look at where you're accessing this webinar from, you might be on your phone, you might be in a coffee shop, you might be working from home, you might even be in the office. But essentially that network perimeter has now expanded massively, and data is absolutely everywhere. So whether you're on-prem, whether you're in the cloud, whether you've got a hybrid kind of setup, there is data there that needs to be protected regardless of where it is. So, again, if you've got on-prem or cloud resource, there's some firewalls that we can offer you guys, and there's some protection that we can put in place. With that, and the threat landscape ever evolving, the threats also have increased. So again, I spoke about that management complexity. Point products are there, and it's good to kind of have that kind of complete coverage, but it's very difficult to then have that integration between products, and then the management piece increases as well. I read recently that the average enterprise organization deploys around 70 different security solutions to secure its network. And if you think about it, that could be 70 different vendors, management portals, integrations, APIs, passwords, accreditation, training. That's a huge amount of workload for you as end users. So again, utilize MSPs, utilize the likes of EBS to make sure that you have that covered, and that skill set is with those guys. And then again, that technology and the requirements in that technology and security have increased, and the requirement is now to have things like deep packet inspection, real-time deep memory inspection, which is a SonicWALL feature, which I'll run through later on in the slide deck. The fact that 90% of web traffic is now encrypted. If you're not unpacketing that web traffic and inspecting it before passing it through, that's a huge black spot in your security posture that you need to look at. And again, you can utilize that type of technology through the SonicWALL firewall with the DPI SSL feature deployment. So now I'm going to touch on the cyber threat report. Again, if you're watching this, please get your phones out. I'll give you a few minutes to kind of scan that QR code. That will take you through to sonicwall.com/threat report, and that will give you access to the threat report that we've recently released. Now, to give you some context of kind of what the threat report is, we've got millions and millions of sensors, firewalls, endpoints out there that run the SonicWALL solution. And essentially, every day that's kicking back information. We've got trillions of lines of code of known malicious information that we can then block against, nice and simply. We've got our zero-day threat analytics that we can utilize for that kind of unknown zero-day threat stuff. However, we've got a huge database, and based on that information that we've collated over the past year, we're able to produce things like the threat report, which show you types of threats, volumes of threats, geographically where they are in the world, what types of organizations they're hitting, and kind of year-on-year increases in terms of that. So I can show you all of that data, and I've actually on the next slide got some UK specific data, which is very relevant for you guys. So in terms of the UK, over the past year, this is kind of what the threat landscape looks like. So as you can see, you've got everything here from your kind of more traditional malicious and intrusion attempts all the way through to cryptojacking and kind of ransomware as we know it, which has been very, very prominent in the past few weeks. Ransomware itself is very difficult to kind of produce. It's very time consuming, takes a lot of effort, and it's very, very targeted. Now, if that doesn't work for those cyber criminals, they're back to square one in terms of that type of attack. They've been very successful recently. If you look at the M&S, if you look at Co-op, Dior, etc., those types of data breaches and ransomware attacks have been successful. But what we're seeing typically, and is shown in the statistics here, is a move to a more traditional malicious attack and a malicious attempt to get onto the network. So these can include things like phishing attacks, malicious links, malicious emails, and they're covered by that malicious attack and intrusion attempt piece. As you can see, these volumes are huge. Attackers can send out a malicious attack to a huge amount of email addresses on a distribution list. Let's say they get a 1% hit rate on those million email addresses. That's a huge amount of organizations they've just infiltrated. So, from a traditional kind of phishing attack, we all know that the weakest link in your network, unfortunately, still is humans. human error is probably responsible for most ransomware attacks and most most detrimental attacks on organizations. So cyber criminals know this, and that's why they're kind of changing their tact slightly to that malicious and more traditional attack vector. But
just to jump in there, James, as well. I think I mean I think there has to be a realization amongst everybody that the figures show it there, the year-on-year percentage increase. This is not going away in terms of what is trying to happen, is it? And it's about staying as much ahead of the game as possible. Is that fair to say?
yeah, absolutely. And look, it's difficult to stay ahead of the game, I suppose. But the more security solutions you have in place, the more integrations, even just keeping your security solutions that you have up to date with the latest firmware, the latest patches, is a fantastic starting point to keep you protected.
I think the other thing I would possibly point out there is that do not think, and I think this is a message, I think you'll back me up on this, James, is do not think that as a business, particularly if you feel that you're in the SMB world, that you will not be affected. I think it is changing, but sometimes an interpretation out there, I think that people think, all right, well, you've mentioned some company names there that are big enterprise businesses, but be assured that the small businesses are being affected just as much, if not more, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Those larger organizations have the budgets to put security solutions in place that are really impactful. M&S, I know they got breached, but they 2 years ago had a £350 million cybersecurity budget. So, those kind of organisations should be pretty well catered for. Whereas your average SMB organisation probably doesn't have a cybersecurity budget. It might have an IT budget, of which some of it gets spent on cyber. So yeah, unfortunately, they're more and more targeted. That's what we're seeing across the globe, not just in the UK. But kind of moving on to the kind of last two bits here. So IoT stands for Internet of Things. So you think of any kind of device that connects wirelessly to the internet. So, if you look around your house, if you look around where you are now, you've probably got a Ring doorbell, you've got some CCTV cameras, you might have some smart appliances. This is exactly the same for offices, right? They've got all of those in play in the kitchen, in the offices. They've got smart fridges, etc. These are all points that connect to your network, but they have no security solutions in play. So these are really weak points for your network and for the organization. And to be brutally honest, you really need to make sure these are segmented into kind of non-business critical in terms of network segmentation. Take that away from kind of your totally flat network. Let's put these away somewhere safe on a different aspect of the network to make sure that if the worst happens, the hacker doesn't have just the keys to the kingdom and off they go. An example of this is quite a famous, I suppose, IoT attack that happened in Las Vegas. If you think of a Las Vegas casino and you think of the kind of reception area, you've got a huge fish tank behind the reception area. Now, the temperature control and the filters were all an IoT device. They were all accessible via a mobile device, so they had connectivity. They're attached to the Wi-Fi network, and they were visible on the network. Cyber criminals saw this as an opportunity, and were able to actually get into the casino's network and put a ransomware attack on them, which was successful. They got a payout from it, all because they were able to access the network through those temperature controls, filters, etc. Really, really famous attack. But again, if they segmented that off from payroll, customer details, all of the kind of personal information, that would have never have happened, and they wouldn't have had any trouble at all. So again, really, really important, and that's up 136% in the UK. So have a think about kind of what devices you have and how you can potentially segment them, and have a chat with the guys at EBS to make sure that your setup and your configuration is correct. Finally, there you've got cryptojacking. So this refers to cyber criminals unfortunately getting onto your network and using your compute power and machine power to mine cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. They're then able to use this Bitcoin to survive as an organization, and they're able to use that on the dark web to buy, sell, trade, and exist as a cyber criminal organization. So this is down drastically, and this is because those cryptocurrencies are quite volatile. The prices of them fluctuate quite a lot. So we're seeing this as kind of a less and less attack, and like I said at the start, that moving towards those malicious attacks, those IoT attacks, they're very, very popular now globally, and this is reflected in the UK. I'll touch on a couple of other kind of pieces now as well. We've obviously mentioned that IoT attack. So globally, it was up 124%. So in the UK, we're above average there in terms of that as an attack vector. But encrypted threats, again, a really, really simple piece to protect yourselves from. And that as an attack vector itself is more and more popular. As I said at the start, about 90% of web traffic is encrypted. You think, oh, it's encrypted, it's trustworthy, it's fine, it can pass through, no problem at all. Absolutely not. So just to kind of give you a visualization, if on your internet browser now you're looking at a web page, for example, and it's got a little padlock on there, that is an encrypted link. So that is HTTPS traffic, and that needs to be inspected. It is unfortunately another attack area for cyber criminals to get onto your network through. So deploying things like TLS decryption, or what SonicWALL call deep packet inspection, so DPI SSL, is very, very simple to do via the firewall. If you've got a subscription and support and a firewall that's in support, you will have access to this. Just bear in mind that it will take up a little bit more throughput and a bit more performance on the firewall. So again, work with the guys at EBS to make sure that what you have in play is suitable. If you need to upgrade the hardware to give you a bit more bandwidth to enable these types of features, then that's obviously an option there moving forwards. But a really critical area of IT to protect is that encrypted piece. Now, I'll finish on a high because I appreciate I've spoken a lot about kind of the doom and gloom and the negatives and kind of scaremongering, I suppose. But you're in safe hands with SonicWALL. We've got a complete portfolio that is incredibly well secured. We've got lots and lots of patented technologies, and I kind of like to touch on one now, which is called real-time deep memory inspection, or what we like to call RTDMI. So it's a patented solution to SonicWALL, and it's available on all of our firewalls. If you're in support, you will have this enabled. This will be running as our advanced threat protection on the firewall, no problem at all. Essentially, it does exactly what it says on the tin, right? So it looks in deep memory at code to understand if there's anything there that's written to avoid things like sandboxing or other advanced threat protection techniques that we will use to block. So very, very clever coders, very clever cyber criminals are now writing that code to avoid those types of techniques that are potentially in place, to then obviously infiltrate the network. But because we've got RTDMI, and again, we're the only vendor to ever have this type of solution, it's patented to us, it's a really unique selling point for us. We're able to identify those and block those so they're not causing any damage to you guys. So what does that look like really? So it equates to about 250,000 never before seen variants of malware over the course of a year, and around 637 variants that we see per day. Now, when we see a never before seen brand new 0-day threat, we're able to tag that, block it, make sure it doesn't get onto whose ever network it's trying to get onto. We then add it to our database of known information, which is called Capture Labs. And again, this is what builds out the threat report kind of throughout the year. It's added to that database, and then within 24 hours, every single SonicWALL device globally will have that signature match against. So what you're buying in with a SonicWALL isn't a static piece. It's something that's ever evolving, ever changing, and you're able to, be protected through all of the different SonicWALL devices globally, and have something that's being updated constantly with the types of threats that we're seeing out there, which is really, really important.
I think that's a really important part, and possibly something that's been very evident over the last few months. I've come across people who have had a SonicWALL or whatever firewall it may have been in many cases, and they think, right, I've invested it and it sits there. Obviously, all the proper business level firewalls, such as SonicWALL, have software on there. They are capturing new new security breaches, essentially, aren't they? So therefore, they can be adapted to keep you as secure as possible. So it's all about keeping up, isn't it, as much as anything?
Yeah, absolutely. There are types of devices out there, and I'm not going to name vendors, but some vendors will be called kind of stateful firewalls. So essentially, they send you an update, which will be a downloadable database of known information. You download it, and that's what is matched against. But let's say you provide and implement that update, and then 10 minutes later, you get hit with a never before seen 0-day attack. That's not going to be on that database, right? So that is when that kind of next generation RTDMI piece with SonicWALL comes into play, and that's when you're catching and building a database, and being protected constantly, as these threats are evolving, as we see, which again is really, really key and really important. I think that might be the end of my presentation. It is. So yeah, look, thanks guys. Thanks for listening. I'm just going to hand over back to Simon now.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks very much, James. We wanted to keep today quite succinct and focused. I have got a couple of questions. One of them is so someone here has got a SonicWALL in place. When should they be changing it? So so they've got a TZ400. Is this suitable in today's market? I'm going to let you answer that, James.
Yeah, of course. So, just as the cyber landscape changes, we develop as a vendor to cater for those changes. The TZ400, which you referenced there, probably came out about 8 years ago now, I'd say. It's nearing its end of support, or end of support date. It's going end of life, and essentially because that's on our previous generation of products, there is an upgrade path to the latest generation 7 firewall, which will give you more throughput, and kind of all those, the kind of performance side of things. But it also helps you with the new user interface. It gives you all of the new features, everything that we've brought out in the past, I'd say 2-3 years, which is pretty extensive in terms of features, integrations, different products, our 24/7 monitoring service. That is all tailored to the generation 7 products. You can't have that on Gen 6 because that's going end of support. For us, we're looking to the future, and we're trying to support those latest products first.
So yeah, so it enhances security, it improves speed. I think it is important that those devices are coming end of life, and there will, in terms of, to put a commercials hat on there as well, it is easier and more cost effective to upgrade those sooner rather than later, I think is what I would say. And if there's anyone with, basically, if it's a TZ300, 400, 500, the NSA 2600, etc., if you're not sure, obviously touch base, then it is time to replace those with, for example, a TZ370, etc. So yeah. I have one other question. This is an interesting one. You referenced some larger compromises. Larger businesses who had recently been compromised in the public domain there. So lots of recent big attacks in the public eye. Would the SonicWALL devices and with the software prevent this?
Again, dependent on when more information is released as to how those breaches happened, we might be able to kind of categorically say yes or no. But we've got services out there that are able to, like I've mentioned before, see those never before seen variants. We've got secure remote access solutions that can assist with identifying potential devices that are coming onto your network or accessing your corporate network that aren't approved. We can put posture checks on those types of devices to make sure that what is accessing those corporate information is approved. So again, I don't know too much detail. I wouldn't say kind of over a webinar as to what has taken place, but I would say a device potentially that isn't corporately issued potentially had access to some of that data, and that's how that data got out. For example, with our secure remote access, with our cloud secure edge product, we would have taken care of that. Equally, we've got our 24/7 monitoring services, which we're able to apply to endpoints, cloud environments, and firewalls. If something does get onto your network and is causing harm and is removing data, if they see 100 gigabytes of data currently, coming out of your network, that's cause for concern, right? So we're able to then, as a team, identify that endpoint, identify that device, contain it, isolate that issue, make sure that that doesn't happen again, and we can kind of put remediation processes in and potentially help you get that data back. So I would say we could have helped, and what we offer is a complete offering in terms of end-to-end assistance for security and the monitoring side of things as well. So we would have potentially helped, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. There's no other questions I've got on there. So yeah, I think that probably just leads us to finish up today. I think we've got one more slide there, James.
I believe so. There we go.
Oh yes, that's it. That's lovely. Right, okay. So yeah, we'll call it the end of the session today. A couple of things. Obviously, I've mentioned our YouTube channel. So if you go to the YouTube and look at EBS, there's lots of different webinars that we've run over, well, not recent months, but recent years as well, and we'll continue to do that. So you may find stuff of relevance there. So please join in and join our channel. You'll see also there's a QR code. It's a great time to mention that EBS have got our annual Thrive 2025, it rhymes this year, event on the 18th of June. It's at Moore Hall. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the page where you can register. You can see the agenda of what's happening. It really does plan to be a very good day. The last couple that we've run have been hugely successful. I know SonicWALL will be there along with a number of our partners as well. So yeah, at that point, I'd just like to say thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, James.
Thanks. Cheers.